Welcome to the very first episode of Great Teams Start Here, your deep dive into what it takes to deliver awesome experiences when recruiting and onboarding. I'm your host, Cate Maguire, and joining me are my fantastic co-hosts, Stephen Graham and John D'Souza. Together, we're drawing on our backgrounds in org change, strategic design, and HR frontline leadership to explore how you can create moments that really matter for candidates and new hires. With this being our first episode, we wanted to help you get to know a bit about how we're thinking about the world of recruitment and onboarding experiences, what's letting people down today, and what we think is the antidote. So John, I'm going to turn to you first. What problems with recruitment and onboarding have you encountered in your time?
So I think one of the biggest issues is that people don't prioritise recruitment. Over my time, over my 15 plus years in HR, you see performance management processes reviewed, you see talent cycles reviewed. How often though do you actually see a recruitment process reviewed? So I think organisations all the way from the CEO down to hiring managers need to prioritise it a lot more. And if they're able to see some of the tangible benefits of doing it better, doing it right, I think companies will do it a lot more often.
I think, it just makes me think about what we're seeing in the world today. We've seen technology displace people's expectations about how they engage with organisations as customers or employees, and really what that's meaning for the recruitment onboarding experience is that people are coming into the job market looking for jobs and having expectations on how the organisation runs that process and the experience they have as they engage. And if you're not there, then the likelihood of you to convert those candidates into new starters is really poor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about for this podcast this morning. Over my time, I can't remember a manager in my team actually coming and asking me how to recruit. They come and ask me so many different questions along their career, but it's because I think as a society, as companies, as corporations, we assume people know how, and we don't get taught it. It's very rare that you get taught it. There's no university course that actually teaches it. Yet it's probably, I would argue, for a CEO, their most important job is having the right people.
Yeah. I think absolutely right. Just sort of drives in this hidden cost, right? This hidden cost to the quality of the people that we get in, but also the likelihood of us to retain them. And if we're putting additional pressure on hiring managers or people that are doing the recruitment within our teams that they're not skilled for, then there's a stress and potentially a cost to kind of keeping them as well.
It's interesting you mentioned the cost because I don't think most organisations actually know what that cost is. And there's a bit of a mindset out there where we think, well, recruitment is just part of life. It's part of working, so let's just keep doing it. No matter how often we have to do it, no matter how much it costs us, it's got to be done. But how often do organisations actually ask themselves, how effectively do we need to do it? And what is the cost to our business of not doing it right? And I think it's really important to ask ourselves that because you can really fill a lot of gaps by doing it right.
If you asked a leader, are our people a differentiator? Are our people our advantage? They'd say yes. Absolutely. Hand on heart, they'd be like, of course they are. That's how we succeed. But then if you unpick that to how they pick, how they ensure they get the right people, and what skills and things it takes to get that right, because let's face it, most organisations don't have them in their core teams. They're just not investing in them.
There's a really interesting, connection too between the amount of time and money that gets invested into developing people once they're in the job. So you've got this whole talent program. Yeah. Companies are spending huge amounts of money on talent programs. But are you finding that there's a disconnect between the recruitment practices and the investment in that end, and then how that channels through to, it's almost a disproportionate investment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting actually how many people can think about when they've gone through an interview process and they've been asked to meet with 5 different managers. But those 5 different managers have asked the exact same questions. And you think about the time wasted, the experience for the candidate, the experience for the hiring managers, because they're having to go in and apologise for asking the same things. But I think if you really deep dive into your process, understand, make sure that everyone's actually aligned on what is it that we're trying to recruit for? What are the characteristics? What are the behaviours? What are the experiences? Do you really need 5 people involved in that process? Probably not. But people still do it. And the cost of doing that, I mean, it's very similar to your point, Kate, about the talent process. You know, you don't go and have the same meeting 5 times. You know, so why do we do that from a recruitment perspective? And so, you know, really deep diving into that, I think, can be super beneficial.
It's interesting, even listening to this conversation, we're kind of attaching to the things that are easy to talk about, like the process and the things that we want to hear or, you know, get from the candidate. But I think in the reality of today, where, you know, recruitment and onboarding is more of a dating game and a two-sided thing than it is, hey, we're just going to grab talent. Like, I think we can all think of perhaps older people in the workforce that have operated in it. You should be happy you've got the job. You should be glad you've got this opportunity with us too. Actually, that's not the reality of how people choose the workplaces they're wanting to be in. It's not the reality of how our best management practices get the best out of our people now. It's really about how we empower and trust. And for that to work, we need to create experiences that show these candidates that this is the type of organisation they're going to want to work in. This is the type of organisation they're going to succeed in. Yeah. And it's so easy to kind of drift back to like, what are the functional, practical things, and sort of forget about that experience that we're trying to create. And that's going to be a little bit different in every circumstance.
Well, you're right. And I think the expectations of candidates have changed significantly. You know, when I look at my daughter who's applying for a job, she's just turned 15. She wants to press 2 buttons and get a response between that point in time and the time she goes to bed. And that's her expectation. And, you know, when I first spoke to her about it, I was like, you have to be patient. And you know what? She got 3 responses from other companies before she went to bed, and she took one of them. And,
you know, she got the job
and she did. And because experience for different people means different things, and companies need to be able to adapt to that. You know, I think gone are the days where you can take 2 and 3 weeks to respond to people, to get back to people, and companies need to be aware of that, because I think there is a level of arrogance where, hey, if they really want the job, they'll wait around. Absolutely not. People will not wait. Well, good people won't wait. So it's really critical you get that right.
So with where you were going with that, John, I'm imagining that your daughter's looking for that sort of part-time job, maybe a quick service restaurant or some sort of other hospitality sort of role, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so like if we think of the examples, there's some great examples that have come out recently in that space where, the time to recruit, and not always the best variable to kind of look at. But in this particular case, absolutely, it's a driver of the experience. We should be looking at it. We should be looking at getting it right, because your daughter is not unique in that being a key driver of the experience for her. We've seen the same thing in some of the work that we've done in some of the quick service restaurants we've worked with. But what we see in that space right now is we've seen some of the biggest biggest companies in that space come out and say they've been able to reduce their time to recruit by 60% by the technologies they've been able to use, by being able to create kind of AI-powered chatbots that have part of this conversation, because that's important. Now, I can imagine at the other end of the spectrum, if you were talking to executives, that would be a real turn-off. Likely to be a real turn-off, maybe, who knows? Like maybe we should be experimenting with that too, and we may in some point. But definitely at that end of the market where people are looking for employment quickly, they're from a generation that wants those reactions quickly, that time to recruit is a big job.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge, especially when you've got high volume recruitment. Time is everything. One of the things you mentioned there was technology. And look, we all know technology can be fantastic. But I think what's really important is to make sure that you're actually solving the problem that you're trying to solve for by getting the technology. Because often what we do is we see these fancy toys out there and we think this is great. But is it actually what your organisation needs? Is it what your candidates need? Is it what your internal people need? And there's a real risk there where you're not solving for what you need because of the fancy toys that are out there.
Don't get me started. I'm so against like this technology first, people second. Like let's flip those around. People first, technology is an enabler. And if we start thinking about things in that way, we drive the experience we want to create for our people. We understand it. We build towards that. We get the outcomes we're after. If we go with technology first, and we are seeing this, there is a trend, and it's a macro trend, it goes beyond recruitment and onboarding right now, that organisations are going, how do we adopt technology quickly to get benefits? And they're doing it in a big way with AI-powered stuff, right? Because everyone sees that that's displacing the way of working. They're like, we just need to do stuff. I think that instead of doing that, we should be going, how do we understand the organisation we want to run, the experiences we want to create as part of that for our customers, for our employees, for our members, whatever the structure we may be working towards, or our franchisees, and then going, what are the technologies that unlock that?
So John, we talked a little bit about the kinds of problems that you've encountered. What is it that you think people miss or don't actually understand when they're setting themselves up to recruit and onboard?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier just on the fact that we make assumptions that managers know how to recruit. And it's a really poor assumption to make, because I've firsthand seen managers, walk up to a candidate that's come in for an interview and literally go straight into questions because that's the template they've been given, that's the template they want to use. And it's just the small things when we talk about experience. What have they done to make that person feel comfortable? What have they done to welcome them? And it's simple common sense. It's something we'd all do if someone visited any of us at our homes. Yet we get into this environment, managers get into this environment, and they don't know how to create that experience. And I think it's something as small as thinking about when someone comes to your home, you don't let them walk in and go straight into eating food. You ask them how they are. You ask them where they've been that day. You make them feel comfortable. And so I think it's the simple things like this that people get wrong. And, unfortunately, I've seen it not only in junior roles. I've seen senior executives do it time and time again because they're on the clock. They need to get to their next meeting, and they're not thinking about how did that make that person feel. That CFO that has come in, or potential CFO that's come in, and you've gone straight into task, do they really want to work for you? I know I wouldn't.
Yeah, I think beyond kind of those elements of what we're missing in terms of how people apply this stuff, I think that what we often miss is actually right back to the why. Like even when we've worked with organisations that have said, hey, there's a challenge here, there's a problem, we're not retaining people in the first 90 days on the basis we'd like to, or something else. When we get in there, most of our clients go, hey, we know what the problem is. This is the problem, right? These are the things we need to fix. Inevitably, we get in there, we go, hey, we're going to slow down. We're going to really understand what's happening in there. We go and research, we go and interview these frontline team members, these people. Then what we learn is there's a disconnect between that leadership layer in the organisation and what's happening at the coalface of the organisation, whether that's in front of a laptop or in front of the fryer. And the sorts of things that we learned in one of the recent projects we were working on was that the recruitment side of it was a bit weak, and there was a bunch of things we could really do to tighten that up. But really most interesting to me was the first day, that first experience you have, which for a lot of these new starters was their first ever job, was a low point. They just missed. The uniforms weren't fitting. The online training hadn't been completed, which meant they couldn't get straight into doing stuff, which they were excited about doing. I should add, like these young people were passionate about their first job, and they're providing value, doing something of impact, and then they weren't able to. So they ended up sort of sitting in a corner doing menial sort of online learning sort of stuff. They didn't engage with the work. They didn't engage with the team. And it's just a missed opportunity. So I think really getting back to the why first and highlighting that disconnect that will inevitably exist because...
You mentioned the disconnect, and what I think is really critical, which doesn't get done all that often, is, how often do you go and ask those people that didn't get the job, what was their experience like? Yeah. Right? We don't ask. And even the people that do get the job, in their first month, are they really going to share with you how terrible an experience they had? It's important, right? It's important to get that feedback. We get it from customers every day. You know, you go to a retail shop or you go to a fast food, you're asked to complete a survey, right? How often do we actually ask someone that's applied for a job, what was your experience like? Yes, you may not have got the job, but we still value you because 9 times out of 10, you're also a customer.
And don't expect the survey is going to do that job either.
I totally agree.
I mean, let's not go down the route of Qualtrics for everything. Let's kind of really get into sort of a more qualitative, personal understanding and kind of use skill to overcome the kind of the risk of someone going like, if I had to answer one of those auto-generated questionnaires, 10 days after I've started, 21 days, 3 months, whatever, like I'm going to be going, what does my boss want to hear?
Yeah.
Or
Absolutely.
how do I make my boss look good? Because I'm invested in them as an individual.
One of the things I was reflecting on while you guys were talking just then is it's not just about the recruitment experience either. That onboarding period, even from that day one to that first week, and not necessarily in entry-level jobs either. How often are new recruits, new hires, come into the team, they get shown around on the first day and sometimes left up to their own devices, or in other times just put through a program of meet every person and their dog on the floor, coffee meetings. The time to actually deliver value for that person is actually something that isn't actively taken care of in much the same way as thinking about the interview experience. It's thinking about that onboarding experience, first week on the job. Have I scheduled you just for meet and greets rather than things where you're actually going to start adding value straight away? And from a manager's perspective, you hire someone expecting that they're going to be adding value. So why would you delay that as much as possible? It just raises some questions for me about, is that also something that people aren't actively taking care of as part of their onboarding experience? Yeah.
I think if you take the example of the Body Shop, right? So the Body Shop recently adopted an approach for their frontline staff where they hire anyone and everyone. You put the application in, there's a job available, it's yours. Right? And it's so simple. That's all about saying, rather than going, hey, how do we understand whether we trust you? It starts on the basis of we trust you, implicitly trust you. If you're in this organisation, you're trustworthy, everyone's going to do a great job. And that kind of flips that paradigm, right? It really changes that. But also the other thing that does is that allows you to go, well, actually, the recruitment side, sure, we have to promote the jobs and sort of get and attract and show the value of a trusting organisation. But it kind of takes a lot of that off the table. You're not doing interviews. You're not getting swept up in that. Your managers aren't getting distracted. So even if you get it wrong, perhaps a little bit of cost to save there. But then they have to really nail the experience on the other side. So I think there is that kind of what happens at the other side. There's organisations that really get that right. And I think, the experience of sort of saying not only what is the day one like, the first shift, but like going, how do we look after all the facets of that person in terms of, relationally, how do we help them create those relationships that are going to make them succeed? How do we make the things that are going to enable them to do their job available, be that technology or materials or processes, the training, all of those bits and pieces that are critical, make them available.
Yeah, and one of the things, it's really important to be super thoughtful about that whole onboarding experience. And there's a risk for us because usually when you're hiring someone, you've already got a list of 10, 15, 20 things for them to do. So it's very easy for us to just have them start on day one and give them their list. All right, we've been holding off. Here's what we need to do. A previous organisation I worked for, I thought when I first started, did a fantastic job of this. And it was a bit of a patience game for me because my onboarding process, I don't think I started doing any actual work for 3 months because the first 6 weeks, I didn't even walk into the office. I worked with the front line. And the importance of that over the following 10 years, to be perfectly honest, was it allowed me to, every decision I made, I remembered my 6 weeks in the front line. I remembered how that was going to impact impact the people on that front line and impact the business overall. And then when I did come into the organisation, into the offices, it became let's gradually get you to meet people so you can actually understand what they do and what value you're going to add and what value they're going to add for you. And for me, it was having to be patient because I wanted to get in there and start getting things done. But I have to say that 3 months was probably what set me up for success for the next 10 years within that organisation. And I think they invested that time. They knew they weren't going to get a whole lot out of me in that first 3 months, but they also knew by investing in that 3 months what they'd get out of me for the next several years to go. Yeah. I think that was critical.
So reflecting on the problems and I guess some of the blind spots that people might have in terms of the recruitment and onboarding that they're doing today, what about that has made you, Steve, and you, John, conscious of in forming up this offering that we're calling ROX?
So I think there's a few things that have become more apparent to me. So as a craftsman that's come from sort of the strategic design or service design space, one of the things that I've learned is we probably in that space as practitioners or craftspeople have probably got a little bit overexcited, enthusiastic about the process of creating great designs, creating great experiences at scale for organisations, and forgot a bit of, well, what are the practicalities of what we need to do to run an effective organisation? So when we thought about how we develop recruitment and onboarding as a service to drive those great experiences, what we've said is, well, actually, what does it take to get these things right in the organisation? How do we support that? So really, we've broken that down into 3 areas. So how do we know when to invest? So we do things like health checks and do things like mystery candidate, where they go in and pretend to be the candidate. So we can provide expert analysis of where you're at right now, again, and benchmark that against what you'd expect to see in the industry. We look at how do we really nail those moments that matter? How do we create the right experience for the future? And go, not only what does that need to be in an abstract form, but go tangibly, what do we need to do to create that reality into the future? And sometimes that includes things like technology selection. So understand the vision, then choose the technology that supports and delivers on that. And when you get that process right, it's really powerful and you save that money on the implementation, which is one of the big costs we see in this. And then lastly, how do we really make sure that we drive for adoption? So we look at things in that space like supporting the change management of these things that are going, really getting the coaching of the people that need to do the recruitment and other things. How do we nail that? And all through this, we bring that, and I know, John, you're going to want to speak to this in a moment, but we make sure that core of what does it take to do great recruitment and onboarding from a technical HR perspective needs to be at the heart of this, as does understanding the value that we create for the candidate, the hiring manager, leadership throughout that organisation.
Couldn't agree more, Steve. I think it's what's really important is organisations actually understanding the problem they're trying to solve for. So many time and time again, we try to fix it with technology. And I think one of the great things that we're doing through ROX is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. And often technology becomes a one-size-fits-all for an organisation, and it's not fit for purpose. It's, so I think what's important for us is to your point, going in there and understanding what is actually the problem, how are we going to solve for it, and what makes sense for this particular organisation. And in some cases, it's not going to be technology. In other cases, it will. But I think what's really important is tailoring what that approach is to what your business needs, rather than ticking a box and saying, hey, we're implementing this piece of technology. That's recruitment done for the year. And I think that's going to be really important for us to really uncover what that looks like for each organisation.
Yeah. And it really makes me think about our role in this is to bring the context and our deep understanding in this space that we've built over time to understand deeply and describe simply for our clients so they can describe simply for the people that they need to influence. And we're able to do that because we built tools and templates and ways to streamline how we deliver for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only build I'll add to that is where we can really support is that initial business case. Because often, your HR person will generally go to their GM or their CEO and say, it feels like we need a new recruitment system or a new process. And, any good GM or any good CEO will show me the numbers, show me the commercial benefit, show me how we're going to benefit this as an organisation. And I think that's where the ROX team can really support this. One, because it's been done before several times, but also the fact that we can help work with that HR team to uncover what's the true benefit. Are we doing this just for the sake of doing it, or really understanding what is the benefit for this business by actually doing it? And I think that's where, we've proven to have significant success in the past.
Yeah, you're right. It's that traversing that kind of problem space to executive communication, right? So that you're able to make, if you're say you're a talent leader within an organisation, you're able to make that chief people officer look good when they're speaking to the CEO about why we need to invest in this and why now.
We've talked a little bit about the differentiation to what other people are doing in the market in this space. Is there anything that you're particularly excited about that we're doing that sets us apart? Yeah,
there's a few things. I think that the one thing that I will say, and Steve pointed it out earlier, was there are many organisations, many tech companies, many agencies that will support with this. I think what makes the ROX team unique is this is our primary focus. We've spent the last few years looking at the trends of recruitment and onboarding. We've spent the last few years looking within an organisation, what does good look like? What does great look like? And I think because the ROX team has been focused on this, it really will have a better understanding as to what will help businesses going forward.
I'm excited about the opportunity to reimagine the recruitment onboarding experience. Yeah, this is a problem worth solving. Organisations right now aren't doing a great job of connecting, or too frequently aren't doing a great job of connecting their employee value proposition with the decisions they're making around attracting those people into their organisation and bringing them on board. And that's an opportunity for us. I'm also excited from where we come from perspective. We have skills that mean we can really deliver on this. The intersection of the skills that we have combined with having built tools and templates and things that mean we can do this really efficiently. And we've done this before. We know what it takes to design great experiences and deliver them, but we also know what it takes to help our clients succeed in their role in helping sort of guide this process through so that they look good, they succeed, and we all succeed together. And I'm also interested to hear more about what's happening out there in the world, to engage with the people that come in and join us on the pod and that we get to speak to, and you, the listener, hearing your thoughts and feelings about what we've said and what else is happening in the world beyond these four walls.
That's a wrap on our very first episode of Great Teams Start Here. In our next episode, we'll speak with one of Sydney's recruitment leaders to explore their reflections on 2024, what's changed, and what they think 2025 will have in store when finding and adding great new employees to teams. We love finding out how people like you are changing recruitment and onboarding for the better. So connect with us on LinkedIn, drop us a comment, or visit us at our website. You'll find all the links in our show notes. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. We'll catch you next time.